Fellow students, thank you very much for welcoming our honored guest with such energy, such zeal. This is an honor, I'm sure, to her as well, to see a house full of young people welcoming her with the energy that she surely expects from young people. So, comrades, we're about to start with our program as our mother has arrived to share her wisdom with us. So I beg your undivided attention as we move on with the program. Thank you very much, comrades.
Good afternoon once again, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bambi Stewart. I am a student here at the university, and I also work within the civil society space, and I work for a human rights organization. I would like to welcome you once again and thank you for your patience this afternoon. Mine is just to welcome you all to this afternoon's Human Rights Dialogue. The theme for this year is the struggle to social and economic transformation in post-apartheid South Africa. I would like to welcome our honored guest and the keynote speaker, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, who's the former chairperson of the African Union. I would also like to observe protocol and welcome the Minister of Home Affairs, Prof. Hlengiwe Mkhize, and all other dignitaries in the room. I would also like to welcome university management, student leadership, and the students within the room. Thank you very much. I will hand over to Carol Crosley, who will give our official welcome.
Thank you, Bambi. Good afternoon, students. Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm representing the Dean of Students, who unfortunately was not able to be here today, so I'm acting on her behalf. And on behalf of university management, to welcome you to the university, for many of us that we call our home. And I thought it would be helpful just to share with you very briefly, for some people who don't know what DLU does, who perhaps don't have enough details on Golden Key Honor Society. And really for those two groups to come together and to celebrate on an occasion like this, I think is very meaningful, because both DLU is really creating a platform for students to express themselves in terms of their leadership, in terms of their own personal growth. And I think Golden Key also from an academic perspective, but not only from an academic perspective, but also encourages that growth of students in terms of their own leadership capacities. And it is useful for you to know that Golden Key is a non-profit organization. It's registered in over 400 universities worldwide. In South Africa, there's a strong, what we call a strong chapter. I think it's one of 15 chapters in South Africa. And certainly it allows for the advancement of academics, leadership, and service. And really in South Africa, it's touched the lives of over 110,000 students. And I really would like to just say, on behalf of university management, on behalf of the Dean of Student Affairs, welcome to WITS, and we look forward to celebrating this auspicious occasion with you. I do ask in advance, your forgiveness, I have to unfortunately leave at 4:30. I have another prior commitment, but I would like to really just say welcome to Wits and look forward to some meaningful dialogue. Thank you.
Just before our SRC president gives us an address and a welcome from student leadership, a bit of housekeeping on my side. We have a hashtag for today's event for those of us who are on Twitter, social media. So if you'd like to keep the conversation going outside of the room, even once the formal program has ended, it is hashtag WITS, HRD 2017. The Twitter page for DLU is at SDLU_WITS. The other hashtag is rights in name only. I'll repeat the hashtags once again. WITS HRD 2017, so that stands for Human Rights Dialogue. The other hashtag is rights in name only. Thank you very much. I'll hand over to the SRC president and then I will give you a bit of context and anchor the discussion for today.
Thank you very much to the program director, to our honored guest, Mam Zuma, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, doctor, yes. But because, you know, we subscribe to decolonization, so we must acknowledge her as our mother. So, Mam Dr. Dlamini Zuma, to the registrar of the university, Ms. Carol Casley, to the leadership in front of me, Yamkela Fanisa, as well as to the leadership of DLU, as well as to the student representative that's here today, to comrades, to fellow students. Welcome to this auspicious ceremony of celebrating human rights. It is very important that we always reflect where we come from, because the past and the future is shaped by the history. And today we are given an opportunity to drink from the wells of knowledge and wisdom, not only domestically, but internationally. It therefore means that we are going to learn the importance of international solidarity, because this issue of human rights does not affect us only as South Africans, but it affects us as Africans in the global community. And therefore, today we are going to get the extensive knowledge about the sufferings of also our brothers and sisters, and why as young people we need to stand up and ensure that we fight for our rights. This particular ceremony comes at the time where young people are in a revolution for fighting for their rights, for their right to education. And we hope that Mam Dlamini Zuma will also give us strength with her wisdom to continue fighting for this particular fight, so that we can ensure that our brothers and sisters can also be afforded the same opportunities that we are afforded, not as a privilege, but as a human right. We hope to hear today from Mam Dlamini Zuma, as well as the minister. I hope that she will partake in this particular discourse on how economic freedom can be aligned with human rights. We hope to hear those provocative answers to the questions that young people have, so that they can shape our struggle, so that they can help us to define our own struggle as the young generation. Because indeed the liberation movement did play its part by ensuring that we get the political power. But it is our right and our responsibility to ensure that we make sure that the second phase of radical transformation takes place by taking our rightful responsibility in ensuring that we fight this fight for economic freedom for our people. So it is through this wisdom that we'll be able to shape our own struggle and stand up and make sure that we fight them. We will not win the war, but there are some battles that we will win. And it is from this wisdom that will gather strength and ensure that we collaborate with each other to ensure that the revolution of young people reaches its destination. And finally, Mam Dr. Dlamini Zuma, I hope you will also teach us how to treat each other with dignity and respect, not as a privilege, not as a charity case to each other, but as ensuring that we strengthen the notion of human rights by not infringing on each other's rights, by making sure that we treat our sisters with respect, in the understanding that we are not enemies. We are in fact comrades in the same struggle for economic emancipation as well as the liberation of a black child in this particular country and the global community. Comrades, I do not wish to bite too much of the time of the conversation that must happen here. But those are my short words of welcome to you. Thank you very much. Learn as much as you can, because the role of young people is to learn, learn, and learn.
Thank you very much. I think what I quite like about the title of today's program is that it's a dialogue. And I would like to challenge the audience to take it as such. There's a reason why we are encouraging student engagement this afternoon. We would really like to increase the level of consciousness that we have seen outside of this room of issues related to social justice. Furthermore, I think it's also important to understand that even within the language of political freedom, throughout the post-democracy dispensation, social and economic rights seem to be lacking. Where, as young people, can we start articulating a roadmap for change? This is what this platform does. So in challenging you to listen, I'd also like to challenge you to engage critically so that even after leaving this room, the conversation doesn't only end at conversation, but we're able to be able to take action. I think some of the things that this afternoon's theme includes within its ambit, are issues around transformation, issues around equality, serious issues and considerations of what the social infrastructure in South Africa looks like, and how, as rights holders, we can make claims through human rights discourse. I would also like to appeal to the audience this afternoon. When you're making your submissions, please just make sure that you switch off the mic after speaking so that we can hear each other. It's a bit of housekeeping that I forgot to mention. And may I also just request that we have our cell phones on silent and respect each other's rights within the room. I think one of the other things that I'd like to highlight when we're looking at a human rights dialogue is that a certain project was embarked upon in South Africa when democracy was won. But seemingly the questions that are coming in and out of different struggles all over the country is that it seems to be an aesthetic project. How do we take account of material gains, but also question where they aren't felt? How do we make things like the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, a living document, but also press upon international obligations like ICESA, continental obligations that have been ratified by the South African government? How, as rights holders, are we able to make the link within a university space and even in the different communities that we occupy? Those are some of the things that I'd like for us to consider when anchoring the discussion today. So more than anything, I would like to encourage everyone to give voice and expression to their lived experience of economic and social rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. As you are welcomed before, I think it's very important to note, do you hear me? Yes. Anyway, I have a village voice, so I can survive without this mic. It is very important to note our theme today, which says human rights in word, or what we are trying to suggest and what we are trying to invoke in our mind by having such a topic like that is to actually think around the fact that how do we make this human right fruitful rather than being documented only in paper? How do we then interact with our human rights issues besides them being there and stuff like that? As you know also, for an example, our justices in South Africa are very expensive. In order for you to get justice, you need for you to be able to pay for it. So we want to take the human rights issues home. So with that being said, I think I should welcome you and welcome me as well. And
And I think what is important is to appreciate the fact that it was a Human Rights Day, it was a Human Rights Month in March. And we thought that we should continue to commemorate it regardless of it falling out of March as a month. I think it is very important to put this dialogue into content, that the reason to commemorate the Human Rights Day is to extract inspiration from those who have fallen before us, and our forebears who have fought for this freedom and equality, that we can be able today to say well, we can enter to the higher institutions like this and be able to access education. But what is important and what is supreme about also about human rights is that we should be able to look at the equality. I will take equality as a supreme right amongst all of them, because you have seen that as this generation we have declared economic freedom as our generational mission or economic emancipation. And we believe that the generations before have managed to succeedly managed to take us to political freedom, but what is left amongst us now is for us to take the baton and then be able to deliver the economic freedom. The access to economy, the mainstreaming of women, the mainstreaming of young people to the economy, the mainstreaming of the economy, so that we don't have township economy, that black people are only isolated and made to think about small business and medium spaza shops. Black people must be able to benefit from their economy. The economy that we have must be able to respond to the challenges that Africa is facing. But when we are doing that, you need to have an intensive education that gives us skills, and the skills that are going to make us to respond to the challenges that Africa is facing. But most importantly, industrialization is going to be very important as part of the equalizer in this continent, because you would know that the education that we have must then be able to respond to the challenges that we're facing, such as challenges of industrializing our continent. Our continent takes away raw minerals, and there are issues of illicit financial flows. And that, by the way, when they affect us, they affect us in the sense that we cannot use that money in terms of developing our people and enable them to access what is rightful to them. So we want to provoke all of us to be able to take this debate and own it amongst ourselves. I know I'm given little time had I been, so I'm trying to summarize everything that I have. I find. So.
Thank you very much. I just want to underscore a few points that have stood out for me from just our first two speakers. You know, there are questions around the labor market, and I think majority of the people in the room, you know, are either in the labor market or trying to gain access into it. What does it look like? What does a labor market that is conscious of social and economic rights being placed above other, you know, considerations in a country that is wrought with inequality? How do we make sense of the social infrastructure? What are the other players when we're talking about socio-economic rights? We've highlighted, you know, the state. We have highlighted you as students in the room, but what about civil society? You know, what about other non-government organizations? Who are the other people that we can count on, perhaps, or mobilize in our quest to realize social and economic rights? So I'd like us to extend the discussion to include, you know, continental bodies, regional bodies too. How do they assist us in what I mentioned in the beginning as a roadmap of change? How do we make sense of a country with such high inequality? How do we make sense of a country that has a political democracy, but it isn't everyone's lived experience? So before I ask our esteemed guests, you know, to address us, I'd like you to set the context for the discussion. I'd really like you to give us the context of what are some of the issues from the welcome addresses that are on your mind at the moment. Once again, for housekeeping, please make sure that once you've spoken, you switch off your mic. I will take rounds of 3. I'm very, very sorry. Do switch off your mouth too, because your turn is over. So I will take rounds of 3 questions. It may be questions, it might be observations. And as I said, I'm really interested to hear of lived experiences when it comes to socio-economic rights. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce our guest speaker for today. It's going to be an easy job for me because I think all of us have managed to see where she has led. So, Dokotela Mama Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma is a qualified doctor. It is not an honorary doctor. Actually, what is exciting, what I found exciting about her bio is the fact that she was one of the founding members of SASO, the predecessor of what is called SASCO today. It's the generation of Steve Biko. Mama Nkosazana studied zoology and botany at the University of Zululand in 1971. And she continued from that and acquired her medical degree as a doctor. Mama Nkosazana is one of the longest serving ministers since the Republic of South Africa. Of course, he was sent by the country to African Union, but he's one of the serving. The only person who's ahead of him a bit is Mr. Jeff Radebe. But he has served in all of the presidents that have been there since 1994. She was then sent by South Africa to lead African Union Commission. And she has done us proud there by also formulating what is called Vision 2063, the Africa we want. What that means in short is a socio-economic blueprint which seeks to drive the development of the continent. So, she's also an NEC member of the ANC. She's an NEC member of the Women's League. Me adding spice onto it is that in all of the conferences she has been elected in, she has been the most voted. She has been the most voted, but she said I must stop because she's not looking for a job. So I will have to leave it there. Mama Nkosazana, you are welcome. Indeed, you are Mama Doctor, because we're decolonizing this education. You are Mama to us, so I'm agreeing with you, President, on that one. Mama Doctor Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, you are welcome on stage. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Indeed, it's a pleasure to be amongst young people. It always re-energizes us to be amongst young people. And I'm happy that you are celebrating human rights and that you are not expecting a speech from me, but it's a dialogue between all of us, amongst all of us. So that is very exciting because in a dialogue, everybody learns. I will learn from you, you will learn from me. So that's what is exciting about this, unlike just coming to give a speech and leaving. So it's an interesting interaction. Already, they've set the tone. But I think before we start talking about human rights, whether we have them or don't have them, or whether they are on paper or not on paper, maybe we should just put a bit of context why we even have the type of constitution we have. Because our constitution is actually hailed across the globe as one of the most progressive constitutions. And this had to be so because we came from the worst colonization of apartheid. So this constitution is trying to address all those fault lines that were there. So it was the lived experience that produced this constitution, which is the best. But now I think the issue is how do we ensure that what is in the constitution is enjoyed by all of us. So that's the discussion I think that we are going to have. But just to put a little bit of context, because when I look around, I can see that very few of you have the lived experience of real lived experience before this constitution. So it would be good to just give a context of what was there before. And I'll just be very short, but just to say, we should always remember that in South Africa, the constitutions that were there before were really not giving rights to black people in general and to Africans in particular. They didn't give those rights. Whether it was just right to citizenship, there was an ID, which we all have now, but before, us Africans and non-white people, as we were called, we had what was called dompas, which was not an ID, but was almost a document to restrict you, to remind you all the time that you are not a citizen of this country. If you are a third-class citizen. It limited your movement, it limited where you can work, it limited your life. So the fact that we now have an ID that is universal is a big victory that we have won. We also, you did not have a right to a passport as an African. It was a privilege that you could be given, but it wasn't a right. It wasn't like you just go and say, apply for a passport. You don't have to explain to anyone where you want to use it, where you are going. So, and of course, there was really no equality before the law, because even the laws, there were laws that favored white people. So if the law itself is not equal, how can there be equality before the law? But of course, there were also inequalities even within that inequality, which I will come back to. If we look at education, we are correct to fight for the right of education, because education, as he said, is the quickest equalizer, besides it being a right. It's also very important for economic transformation. You can't transform an economy without the prerequisite skills. So education. But what was there before? For Africans, eventually there was Bantu education for us. Me, if I don't speak good English, it's because I studied Bantu education. And Bantu education was meant to give us just enough education to give the majority of us just enough education to be able to take commands from the white people and be able to follow the instructions they give us. And it's not a political propaganda. They said it. They even said, why should Africans study maths and science? Because it's just, they will never graze in those pastures of science and technology. And so that's what we had before. So if we look at health, it was the same. But not only did we have Bantu education, but the infrastructure for education, the teachers, everything was inferior. Even today, because we have not been able to catch up, if you take a white school and an African school, you see the infrastructure is not the same. And it wasn't just that your infrastructure was inferior, it was purposely done so. The teachers were not enough. I remember when I started school, there were teachers that were called Utisha Tiki. Utiki was 2.5 cents because the parents would put Otigi together to hire one of the kids to come and teach you because there weren't enough qualified teachers. And the parents would then, in the village, put this money. And then batumtaga sbanbana ageza zofundisa la abe utisha wala botike siba collect time. So that was the type of education struggles that we went through. Just to put your struggles in context. And of course, we, at some stage, were even told to study in Afrikaans. We didn't even have good Afrikaans teachers, let alone now to learn in Afrikaans. If you look at housing, there was no real housing for people. In the rural areas, there were no housing. In the urban areas, there was no housing except those houses that were meant to be dormitories for people who work in the cities as long as they work. When they no longer work, it's a problem. And then there were hostels for the mines. And even those houses, you can see they were even had asbestos, which we know is very detrimental to your health. Most houses didn't have electricity, they didn't have running water, they didn't have any of the basic things. And later, some of them were built with running water. Very few had electricity. The roads, even in those townships, our culture was denigrated. We were made to feel that our culture is barbaric. It should not be practiced. And if we did, it was because we were barbaric. We continued to be barbaric. Our languages were not recognized as real languages. So there are many things I can say. Jobs. In this country, Namana there would remember, there was something called job reservation, where it didn't matter whether you can go and have luck to study somewhere else, come back, those jobs you were not supposed to get. But there were also job reservation for the white people who really couldn't make it through merit, but these jobs were reserved for them. So that's what was there. The land. The land. Of course, Comrade Harry Kwala used to say to us, you know this question of the land. Who came carrying land to this country? And now I have to be worried, you know. But the question of the land, 1913 was probably the culmination, but land had been, people were being dispossessed since 1652. It didn't just start with 1913. 1913, I would say, was probably the culmination of that. So there was general land dispossession. And of course, mines were started. And part of pushing people away from the land, besides acquiring land for themselves, was also to make sure that people did not have a livelihood so that they can be forced to go and work in the mines. And that's why they introduced all these kind of taxes, which you had to use hard currency to pay. So you could not work on your land and live on your land. You had to now go and be employed either in the mines or somewhere or in the sugarcane. Of course, they also brought people from Asia as indentured labor to come and work, especially in the sugarcane fields, and so on. Because we don't have time, I won't go into details. The mineral resources. The mineral resources should be and are collective heritage. But we know what the situation was. They were not treated as such. And even financial institutions, everything was geared against Africans, even being entrepreneurs. The best we could be was to have some shop or butchery or somewhere in the township. But we were not given the tools or the space to be proper entrepreneurs. Women in that context were the most oppressed, because, as I say, workers were exploited, super exploited during that time. So black people were discriminated. It doesn't matter who you are a doctor, you are something. If you are just black, there's discrimination. If you are a worker class, there's discrimination. But if you are a woman, you occupy the bottom rank of society. And if you are a black woman, then you occupy the dust. So that's where we've come from. Just in a nutshell, I'm not touching everything, just so that when we look at these rights and say they are on paper or not on paper, we have a context of where we've come from. So I started by saying now we have a right to citizenship. It's not a privilege, it's a right. If one of your parents is a South African, you are a South African. If you are naturalized, you become a South African. And that citizenship you exercise equally. But of course, I'll come to specifics where that equality is not there yet. We have free movement. You can go to any part of South Africa. There's no blackjack that's going to knock at night and say, who's this one? Why is she here? She must go back to where she has come from. We have no homelands, because when they were trying to say now they think we must have citizenship, they gave us citizenship of their homelands. And you know the homelands, I won't go into details about them. So I think we have citizenship, and that's a good thing. We have a right to an ID, to a passport, to everything. You have a right to vote. Whether you exercise it or not is up to you, except that in the last election, there were some problems about addresses and so on, because that legacy of apartheid is still the one that informs who has an address and who doesn't. Because there are people who live in areas, my home where I grew up, up to today, there's no street, there's nothing, it's a village. What street address am I going to have? So when we look at these things, and I hope our judges, when they look at these things, they must take the context and say, how easy is it to just have a street address today? So these are the things that still remind us of where we've come from. And of course, he said we have equality before the law. It's true. All of us, men, women, poor. But when you have to access, then that's where the inequalities come. Because our judicial system is very expensive. You have to find a lawyer. How many of us have thought of suing one, this or the other, but then you think, where am I going to get the money to pay the lawyers? That's a privilege because you can then sue or decide not to sue or to sue. But sometimes you have to defend yourself. So there, the inequalities come because even though there is a legal aid, which is an improvement, but it doesn't cover every area. So not everyone has the same access to the lawyers and to the legal system. But also, because of societal attitudes that still remain from the past, if you are a woman, there are more problems in accessing our legal system. Sometimes women tell us that if you are raped and you go and report, it's like the police sometimes ridicule you instead of trying to help you. That's why the government has now tried to have this the empowerment services were not to Sanani. What are they called? Tutuzela centers, yes. Yes, that's why we have the Tutuzela centers, which are supposed to be a one-stop place where the police, the doctor, the social workers, everyone is there to assist. And that's something that is new, that's coming with the government. Yes, it may not have covered every corner of the country, but there is progress there because it has been recognized that it is a problem. Domestic violence is the same. Women come to report, and instead of the police taking the statement, they will try to ask as though there is something that you could do to deserve to be beaten up. But all those things, the police are being trained now to try and understand these things, and more women, police women are brought. But there's still a long way to go. Education, the government has tried to make education accessible and universal. But, of course, the universality also means that if it's universal, it means nobody should be excluded from education because of poverty. So that, I think, is the struggle that we are waging now, to say there should be no child excluded from any institution if they qualify. But we should also look at that, because I think, for me, education, just like the manifesto of the ANC put education as one of the priorities, the government must also match that in its priorities and in its budgeting. But I think there are, I mean, if you take the white community, for instance, there may be few white families that need assistance, but many of them can pay, I think, personally. The majority of them can pay. But there are that, and those that can't pay should be assisted. But Africans, the majority, there are lots of them who cannot pay, who should be assisted. And that's the way, in my view, that we will begin to address the inequalities through education as a start. But education must not just be general, that you have 12 years of education and so you are educated. It must also speak to what you can do. It must speak to skills. So I think we should look at our education and ensure that people come out with skills, but we should also be moving a bit more towards science, technology, engineering, maths, innovation, research. We should have social scientists, but not overwhelmingly, because the economy does not want an overwhelming number of social scientists. It needs scientists as well. It needs technologists. It needs artisans. So we need all the layers, which I think we have not really addressed properly. But for that to happen, the teachers also must be there too, so that they put in the pipeline the necessary. So the government has done a lot. It still has to do a lot in terms of education, but also in terms of infrastructure. We shouldn't really be having, we should have water, we should have electricity, we should have the basic things in our schools. We're not even asking. I mean, I went to one school, I was so envious a few weeks ago to listen to a Soweto band. But they were performing in one of the white schools. I mean, the auditorium there was like, you know, just, and I was saying, I've never been to an African school with an auditorium like this. But I wasn't even looking for the auditorium, just the basic facilities. Sports. I mean, sports should be part of school. In the white schools, they have sporting facilities. They have sports as a compulsory activity in the school. But we don't. So we need to address, of course, we can't address everything in one day, but we need to look at those things. Housing. Lots of people now have at least water, but there's still a lot more that don't have, so we have to address that. Electricity we've done very, very well, but there's still a segment of people, especially in the rural areas, that do not have electricity, that we can then address through off the grid. But it's a right they must enjoy as well. Roads, especially rural roads. Our culture, promoting our culture, our song, our dance, our stories, that can also be a big job creator. We have seen in countries where they use it, even in Nigeria. Now they are the biggest film, second biggest in the world. So we need to address those kind of things, because culture is also important, because it's like your soul. So if your soul is not with you, then you are not together. But in culture, I believe that you need to stratify culture. You need to say, because culture is dynamic, it's not a static thing. It's not that our grandfathers were doing things that were done 1,000 years ago. It moves with the time. So we need to evaluate what are those things that we should keep because they are good, they can take us forward, and then we keep those and we advocate for them, we promote them. And those that are neutral, so we don't bother. Those who want to do them, they do them. Those who don't. Those that are detrimental, we should say so and try and not do them. But it should be those that are detrimental that we should say no to. Then the land issue, I won't say a lot because a lot is being said about land. But we can't you can't have the majority of the people in a country not having access to land. It's not sustainable. Simple, it's not sustainable. So we need to find ways of land redistribution. And we need to discuss going forward. There is a policy conference in the ANC coming. Those issues must be there, discussed. Policies must be reviewed and looked at, and I think that is going to be done. Now we come to, say, mineral resources. South Africa, as part of the continent, like the rest of the continent, we have lots and lots of mineral resources and natural resources, and they must work to improve the lives of people. We must turn them into wealth for the people. So we need to look at how do we first make sure that these minerals are accessible to newcomers in the market, and how are they assisted in financial institutions? Are they responsive to their needs? And how do we add value and beneficiate them so that we create the jobs here and send beneficiated goods and value-added goods so that when we export, we get more revenue and we stop importing a lot of the things that we could do here. But it means we must really kickstart or accelerate industrialization. Because without industrialization, manufacturing, we will always be importing finished goods and using lots of revenue to send out. So, but everybody has a right to a livelihood. So our training must train us for three things. It must train us to be innovators. So we need to also interrogate our institutions, whether they are training us in that direction. Secondly, it needs to train us to be entrepreneurs, to be job creators, and then train us to be able to get decent jobs. So that whole spectrum must be there, because we can't all be job seekers. At the same time, it's not realistic to say we can all be job creators. So there must be that spectrum of job creators, decent jobs, innovators, so that we actually manufacture things that we innovate and commercialize them. You know, one time I was very embarrassed. One German was telling me that the solar panels that they were using, were actually first innovated here, but we didn't do anything about them. And we had an electric car, we never commercialized it. Now we're going to be buying electric cars from somewhere else. So that's another area that we need to look at, because these economic rights, without all those things, we will not be able to close the gap, we will not be able to enjoy those economic rights. But because it's not a speech, I'll stop there and I'll come back if need be later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to now open the floor for engagement. I will, as I mentioned, I will take rounds of 3 questions. I will try to make this process as democratic as possible, to give everyone an opportunity to, to reflect and to engage on what has been shared. I would like to also say that if you aren't given a chance to speak, the conversation is still happening on Twitter. VitsHRD27 is the hashtag. So I will start. So let me do it this way. I'll start in the middle, go to the left, go to the right, and then come back to the middle, to the left, to the right.
My question is directed at Uyamkela, and I'd also like for Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma to also respond to it. I was wondering if there is a possibility to sort of like parallel the mainstream economy and the township economy, because there's this important conversation that is going on that we need radical economic transformation. However, it seems like there seems to be a shift in that they want to prioritize one over the other. So now my question is that, isn't there a way in which we can sort of like parallel the township economy as well as mainstream economy? Because I've seen that in trying to prioritize mainstream economy, we end up pushing out township economy out of business. An example would be the boom in shopping centers in townships. Sharp, we have Pick and Pay, and it looks like it's development and that kind of thing, but who's owning Pick and Pay? And what about our parents that have always had the butcheries that you spoke of, Dr. Nkosazana, that's how they sustain themselves, and that's how they still continue to sustain themselves, and that's how they send us to school. So how can we come up with a framework that the one does not completely push over the other? Because the truth of the matter is that we are not going to be able to achieve radical economic transformation in mainstream economy over one day. And in the process, while we still do that, we must not also give away our township economy to white monopoly capital. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'm Candice. I'm doing my honors in international relations with a specific focus to development and gender. And I basically have 2 questions for you, Mayor. Firstly, with focusing on the African Union, I just want to know, what were your challenges facing a patriarchal institution as a South African woman? And obviously you have projected this amazing agenda being the Vision 2063, but how was it for you to be able to push issues of gender onto the African continent? And secondly, you talk about infrastructure with specific focus with the rape empowerment centers, but how are we can have the infrastructure, but how are we addressing the mindset and the attitudes that men have towards women? The fact that we go into taxis and we're raped, the fact that we go into Spur and tables are shook. We need to address these mindsets, and how are we going to have these conversations to say that we as women are not just subjects and objects, that we have free will and autonomy, and that we need to be respected. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Program Director. Ngibingelele umama Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, ngokukhulu ukuhlonipha nokuzithoba, ngibingelele lonke ama-panelists akhona. Igama lami nguNhlanhla Ngwamchunu, fondly known as Comrade Macingwane. I've got, before I go into my questions, Ma'am Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, one must first applaud you that the Vision 2063, it came under a woman, an African black woman, and we take pride in that. In fact, we are very much proud that you've disqualified the notion that women are irrational and are incapable to lead. And we thank you and we say Asante Sana for that. You have, in the conversation that we're having right now, I've gathered that you are very passionate about the skills revolution, in particular in confronting the unemployment of the young people. And I've followed a number of conversations you have heard in different platforms. And what up is that you are very passionate also about the blue economy, which focuses on the ocean economy. How do we then mesh the two, the skills revolution into the ocean economy? To say, are we looking at maybe having a fleet in terms of our own boats, in terms of our own harbors, and billions of rain on an annual basis due to the fact that we do not have the fleet in our ocean economy? How do we plan to tackle that? In your focus as the chair of the African Union as well, I'd like you to shed light in terms of what were the institutions that were put in place in order to assess the performances of the head of state. I mean, if Africa really wants to define itself and really wants to give development itself, it should first answer questions such as, what is it that we do not want to see, before we even get to the question of what we want as Africans. So I feel like we've tackled that question of what is it that we want to see, but have we developed capable and competent institution to look into these matters, to say, head of state, sorry, and so you have not performed well, but you're causing a crisis in this country and stuff like that. Have we looked at that? I'm sure that would look into encroaching on the sovereignty of the countries as well, but that assessment institution in place, have we got that? The African criminal court, have we established that, you know what I mean, so that we can stop being slave of the ICC? Thirdly, and finally, I promise you, that's a final question. Don't you, Ma'am Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, don't you think it is the time whereby we look into our constitution, in particular the property clause in sections 25, which speaks of the land, and the subsection 2 and section 2A and 2B, which speaks of the land with compensation. And it goes further to subsection 8, which then illustrates us to, or which presents us to land that, to say, actually the government may create legislative powers in order to supersede whatever that is mentioned in the above subsections. Don't you think that South Africa now is ready to amend the constitution to land without compensation? Thank you.
You want to start? Okay. Okay, the first question I think is very important. Not only in South Africa, but generally, because we are importing this model somehow to other African countries. I remember I used to live in Zambia at some stage. So one time I visited Zambia and there was a nice shop that did pottery that I liked. So I went and it was no longer there. There was now a mall. So they said, oh, it's in that mall. So I went to the mall. They said to me, yes, it was in this mall, but it has closed because the overheads were too high for it. So they went under, whereas they'd been there for years before the mall was there, and they were flourishing. And so I think it's a very big challenge that we have to address. In I think in a different, we can't use one solution. For instance, one of the things in a mall in Africa, some African countries have said should happen, is that, okay, you have a mall, you have these supermarkets, because our supermarkets, the retail companies here are going out to the countries in Africa. So one of the things that some of the countries have said is that, no, you have to stock your supermarkets with what we grow. And then they come with saying, oh, the packaging, this and that and the other. They say, no, you have to then train our people to work and to be able to reach the standard you want. So some of them are beginning to do that. But in the townships, it's a big challenge, because when they come with a mall in the township, the space in the mall tends to be very expensive. And so the people who had shops cannot buy space in the mall to be able to continue to. So I think it's a challenge that us, the government, the private sector must address. Because it is true that these malls are actually killing the township or rural economy, where there is rural, if they are in the rural towns. So I can't lie to you and say I have a blueprint, here it is. But it's something that we have been, even in the AU, talking about, because that's why some of these countries have gone to have these demands that, yeah, maybe when you start, you have to train our people and source from us at least, and not bring everything lock and stock and barrel into the country. And our people now don't know where to sell their milk, where to sell their... So these are the challenges that we must address in this transformation that we are talking about. And see whether there could be some arrangement that when a mall is built, even before it's built, that it should have places where the people who have businesses who are supplying that neighborhood can, at maybe prices that they can afford, be in those malls. But you see, because our economy is so monopolized, you find that the wheat is bought when it is still in the field. So even if you want to bake bread, you probably won't be able to find the wheat from the farmers. And then you find that it's milled. Then we are one of the few countries that I know who don't eat bread that is baked in the neighborhood. We eat bread that is baked in bulk and transported in bulk. And so you find that also those people have bought shelves ahead of time in the supermarket to put their bread. So even if you were a small bakery, you probably won't be able to get the shelves at Pick and Pay, because those monopolies would have bought the shelves for the next whatever time to put their bread. So I think part of transformation should be also to break the monopolies so that there is competition also, because monopolies also kill competition. So when there's no competition, the prices can be anything, because you know that Nobody else is supplying this. So even for capitalism, monopolies are not good. Even if you want to be a good capitalist, you cannot, because competition is important, but also small and medium enterprises are the ones that create jobs. It's not the big companies, few big companies that will provide us with jobs. It is the small and medium enterprises, many of them, that will create jobs. And that's what we have to be looking at. So that we also look at new enterprises and not say, because in the township, there was always a spaza shop and a bakery and a butchery and babo kandi katulo. We must stick to that. We must also look at what are the other enterprises we can have, because those are the job creators. And so when you talk about the mainstream economy, for me, the mainstream economy must include the small and medium enterprises. Otherwise, we'll never be able to create the number of jobs we need and involve as many people as entrepreneurs if we don't have that. But it's a challenge that you who are studying must innovate and bring solutions to. Okay? Yes. And then the second question was about just the gender challenges that I faced at the AU Fest. Well, indeed, the AU, like many international organizations, is very patriarchal. And the first challenge you just face is people who just don't want to change, who don't say, but if you bring women here, or if you bring this quota, it means we have to be out. So even though there is a regulation that, for instance, when they bring names to me after they've done their interviews, at least one of the 3 names from which I can choose should be a woman. And then they just bring 3 men. And then they bring 3 women below the line who have failed. So in the end, I had to say, well, I don't entertain anything that does not have a woman amongst the 3 from which I can choose, not a woman who has failed, who's below the line. And it took time for them to understand, and I'll just send it back and say, we can't fill that post unless. Because it doesn't mean that I'll always choose a woman, but there must be an option to take a woman. But if you just bring 3 men all the time, it means you're giving no option. So we had to do that. And of course, you can't change a lot in 3 years, but in 4 years. But we were able to bring the management level to women when I came were less than, maybe they were around 15 or less %. But by the time I left, they were over 30% in the upper management. Of course, you can't just retrench people there. So you have to wait for attrition and then fill the post. But even then, we could make that difference. But there was resistance. But I think, like all human beings, when they realize that, well, this is here to stay, they then start to cooperate. But also we had to introduce a lot of policies which were not there to make the environment also conducive for women. Because sometimes you can have women, but if you don't have policies that make it possible for women to stay and to flourish, then it becomes a problem. And then dealing with the stereotypes, well, part of dealing with the stereotypes is, as I say, policies, but you also have to show by example that that stereotype is wrong. So unfortunately for women, they have to sometimes work twice as hard to get the same recognition. Men can be kind of just get along and they get the recognition. But for a woman, you have to really, until those stereotypes are gone. But for now, we have to do that. And of course, the mindset that you are talking about, even here in South Africa, which is really very difficult. I think we need to look at a whole range of things. We need to look at language, because language influences behavior. The way we talk influences behavior. I remember there was a big argument, even at the AU when I was the foreign minister, when we were saying, even at the ANC, when we were saying chairperson, even some women were saying, but what's the problem? Chairman, what's the problem? I can be a woman and still be called chairman. And we said, no. This influences behavior. That if you're looking for a chairman, automatically you look for a man. And not just those words, but generally. You even in our homes, there's still sometimes language that is very sexist. And it just gets brushed aside or accepted. So I think we need to work with the whole spectrum, language. And then we need to work on the laws, on the implementation, on even the sentencing, but also in society, we must work. I mean, women and progressive men must work together to eventually have a situation where you are ostracized in society if you do those kind of things. Raping should be a big stigma that nobody wants to have. Abusing children should be a big stigma that nobody wants to be associated with. So we need to work at different levels, not just government. Yes, government must do. Yes, the police must do. But in society, in the churches, in all the forums of society, but the media also, because the media also still reinforces those stereotypes. I remember one time I was in a meeting of world women parliamentarians, and they were sharing their experiences. One woman from Mongolia was sharing their experience of how they were managing to get more women in parliament when they didn't have. And they were saying one of the things they did as women, they came together from different parties and said, let's have a common platform and also go to the media and talk to the media together. And one of the things they said to the media, look, we don't want you to treat us differently. Just treat us as you treat male candidates. When you talk about male candidates, you talk about them as candidates, you talk about their manifestos, you talk about, when you come to us, you talk about our hairstyles, our bums, our what. And so you remove what we are about. We are candidates to parliament. You talk about how we dress, we talk about all those frivolous things when it's women candidates. So they said, let's have a pact that you treat us the same. And so I'm just using that as an example. There are many. For instance, even in adverts, when they advertise nice cars and all that, they'll advertise us with us, women, nice, beautiful, fine. But it's the association that here is an object that you can buy and possess, and you associate it with a woman. And an object that you buy and possess, you do anything to it. So it's all those things that need to be addressed. It's not just one thing. And also us as women, we are mothers, some of us. You are young, but us, lots of women who are mothers, they don't treat their sons and their daughters the same. And then they expect their sons to know equality when they are adults. Children bring back to society what society taught them as children. So it's a whole spectrum. If we had a whole day, we could discuss a lot. But I'm just saying, for me, it's all those things that we have to look at. Because if you treat your son as a little prince, he'll behave like that. And you treat your daughter as a little Cinderella, she will behave like that. And in fact, I also read somewhere that if you train young women in karate, in these disciplines, they say that people who attack women in the streets or out there, somehow when a woman shows confidence and they don't go for her, they go for the person who looks a bit meek. And so I think one of the things we have to do for our young women is to do that, so that they also have confidence and don't look at like easy prey to people. So it's a big topic, but I will leave it at that. And then the last question was about the skills revolution and the blue economy. Yes, it's true. I'm very passionate about the skills revolution because I think there is no country that can develop to its full potential without the skills. And there's a big shortage in Africa. So that's why we introduced the issue of the skills revolution. And the skills at all levels, as I said. But when you link it to the blue economy, we already, when I was at the AU, we were talking to some of the countries like Norway and so on. Because, for instance, the Norwegians, their economy, almost their entire economy is based on the ocean from the time of the Vikings. Then they got oil from the ocean as well. So we were beginning to work with them to see how they can assist. But we have worked in Africa to encourage ship owners. We have established an organization called Women in Maritime, because it's clear that as we pay more attention to the blue economy, we need to also have the skills. Without the skills, you can't do shipbuilding. Without the skills, you cannot run even the ships, even if you bought them. But for me, we could start somewhere, because we export as a continent and import 90% of those imports and exports are transported on the maritime highways. So they are transported by sea. So we need to have fleets. But even before we have fleets, we can say to those ship owners, if you are taking stuff here out or bringing stuff here, a certain percentage of the workers on your ship should be from here and trained, and they will not refuse, because a lot of the ship owners, when we were talking to the Norwegians, for instance, they were saying Norway is not able to supply the human resources they need for their fleet, because they have almost the biggest fleet. So they get Thais, they get Chinese, they get Filipinos. So why not Africans? Because a lot of their stuff comes here and out of here. But eventually, Africa must, and South Africa must own fleets that transport. So we must be in the shipbuilding. We must have those skills. You'll be surprised. The country that owns a sizable fleet on the continent is a landlocked country. And that landlocked country realized that our exports, whether we're landlocked or coastal, go by sea. So we might as well have transport on the maritime highways. So they are only, they cooperate with a coastal country, but their fleet works. They are a landlocked country, and that's Ethiopia. Yes. So I'm just making it, they have a fleet bigger, South Africa doesn't have much, but just to show that it's doable, they don't have enough, they should get more, but also there are lots of consumables that are used on those ships, but they are not ours. They buy everything, including water, from somewhere else. Why can't we say they must buy it from here if they are taking stuff out of here or bringing stuff here? So those kind of things initially, but in the long term, we should have. And it's not only the people who work in the ship, but the insurance that insures those goods. It's not our insurance, it's insurance that come from over the seas. So there's a whole value chain in the blue ocean, just in the transport. The logistics, taking things from the factory to the ports, from the ports, the insurance linked to that, the insurance that insures the boats, the goods that are taken, the people who work in there, the people who repair those ships, and then what's in the ocean. The Western countries, they've already mapped out the minerals on the ocean, including some of the oceans that some of us may be owning. They've already, some of the places they are already doing, not on the continent yet, but soon, they are already doing deep sea mining from some of the small island states, the Pacific and so on. So the resources, as they deplete the resources on land, they are looking at the same resources, because a lot of the same resources are in the ocean bed. So they are looking at that. I went to a world conference on the blue economy, and I was amazed how much resources are on the ocean bed. Besides the fisheries that we don't even benefit from as a continent. Most of the people who fish, fishing boats, are not ours. So we need to establish that industry quite seriously. And of course, the tourism. You just need to go to Cape Town, see who's on the coast, go around the eastern seaboard, go around the north coast of KZN, who's on the coast. So we need to reclaim the sea and its resources. But we need to train the skills that need to work there. Oceanographers, marine biologists, shipbuilders. In the shipbuilders, lots of skills that are needed. Insurance company, there's a whole range of skills. And lots of employment that we can get, because for the foreseeable future, we'll be importing and exporting through the sea. So that's my answer to that question. Then there was a question about, or still from you, about the institutions. You know, it's true that when we were doing Agenda 2063, we said the Africa we want. But we did look at the Africa we have. And we did identify certain things that we thought needed quite a lot of attention. And some of them are institutions and policies somewhere, some of the policies that need to be implemented, whether it's the Charter for Democracy or the peace and security architecture, where we then said we want to silence the guns. The Charter for Democracy speaks to what is expected in a participatory democracy, in a democracy where citizens really do have a say. And we recognize that, yes, there is democracy in Africa in most countries, but it still needs to evolve to be the democracy that we can say is ideal. You know, there is the peer review mechanism that was established. And we've been saying that peer review mechanism needs to be strengthened, because when it's used properly, it's very good. Some of you, I don't know what you are studying, but if there are any scholars around the issues of conflicts and so on, you will realize that the peer review, when they reviewed Kenya before 2007, they actually predicted almost what was going to happen and said it must, and identified the problems and said they must be addressed. And if they are not addressed, was sitting on a time bomb. That report is there. And even before they were corrected, that time bomb exploded in 2007. So that mechanism, if it's used properly, it can be very useful. We were even saying at the AU that that mechanism must be developed, because at the moment it's more political and social. And we were saying we need to develop it on the economic side so that we can peer review our own economies through that mechanism. But we need to develop it properly. So, and then the courts, there is the Human Rights Court, and it has now been agreed that that court its mandate must be extended to also deal with the issues that the criminal justice issues that the ICC the ICC may be dealing with. But the ratification of that amendment is very slow. That's why it hasn't come into force yet. Because even us as citizens, we do not look at what our heads of state agree there and then follow up in our countries to say, have you rectified? And so we need to do that. But in the meantime, you will recall, some of you, that there was the issue of the president of Chad, former president of Chad, Hissène Habré, who had committed serious human rights violations, killed people, mass graves. So the continent said, we can't wait for that court. We need to do something in the meantime without sending him to the ICC. So a court was established in Senegal just for that specific. He has been tried there and found guilty. He is now appealing, but that court was established by the AU, funded by member states, of course, and some donors, but he was found guilty. He's now appealing. We'll see what the appeal says. And there is also a section of reparations for the victims. So it's not like nothing is happening. So those institutions must be looked at. But also, what we also said was wrong is for us to be dependent too much on donors. And that's why we had to have a change in the way we fund even the commission, even the AU, because it's the commission and all the other organs. Because we said it is wrong to depend on donors for your programs, because who pays the piper calls the tune. And so we can't sit here and have a piper away calling the tune in our organization. So that's why this idea of taxing some of the imports, an import levy was introduced of 0.2% on some of the eligible imports so that there is predictable funding. But also, we are also looking at not just funding the organs and the AU Commission, but also going forward, if there is extra, to see how we can also assist in funding some of the infrastructure and so on. So just to say, yes, we looked at some of the issues. I can't exhaust it because we don't have time, but yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think there's something also worth noting that state enterprises and procurement policies need to be very transformative in its nature, because they can then also play a role in mainstreaming small and medium enterprises. You need to have a will, a political will from those that are leading those institutions. Because, for example, if you have assembled a Gautrain in Germany for the first time, for the second time, it should be able to be assembled in South Africa with products, with workers of South Africa. And we should not be ashamed about those things. And in the tendering and procurement system, there should be regulations that 60% of products that compose this subject, they should be coming from this country. And it's also going to be able to make these monopolies to be forced to do what is called skills transfer. And then by that, they'll be forced that we're not going to give you a tender. We're not going to give you a tender if you're not going to fulfill these requirements. And these requirements, for example, it can be 60% that the product must be composed of things that are coming from the country. The workers, the board must consist of black or this and that type of percentage. So part of the things that we'll need is a political will really. And most importantly is that state-owned enterprise must play a role in mainstreaming some of the small and medium enterprise unapologetically. You know how refreshing it is now to be in Uber, is that when you are listening to radio, is that you are listening to 90% local music. Our artists now are paid. They are not dying, being unburied. Now we must send SMSs worth 10 rand so that we can bury our artists. It cannot be a situation like that. So I'm just saying there are positivities. You just need militancy, political will. We cannot continue to call this radicalism that cannot feed our people. It needs to be something that we can touch and that we can feel. And government must not waste their time in terms of the will that is given by their people. So they should not be ashamed. I know most of the time when people, the tendering system is always treated as if black people look for shortcuts so that they can then go there. But by the way, people who benefit in tenders, there's big companies. And when one person, a black person, is looking for shortcuts, that one, he does not want to do this and that. So it's very important that we also make sure that procurement system and regulations are transformative and favors indigenous people unapologetically, especially in big projects. We give lots of projects to infrastructure, for example. How many of us know, by the way, that Transnet has assembled a train that is intercontinental? Just recently this week, under this government. So it means that if we can then be able parallel to do these things, what we can also do is that we also need to change the stigma around artisan. Because by that we can then be able to produce projects there that can be able to be one actual that tenders to these projects so that we can then be able to grow economy and we no longer treat our people as small and medium enterprise business people. So there's a lot that needs to be done. As Mama said, that there's no blueprint about this thing. That is one, that you can do this. We can do all of these things simultaneously. But the state must not fear to have its pinch on white monopoly capital. Thanks.
Maybe just to add to what he has said, it's not just the state-owned enterprises, even our own procurement. Government is a big procurer of services. So I think through using that also, we can build some of the small and medium enterprises because we procure, whether it's for hospitals you procure for food, for linen, for most things. For the correctional services, you procure. For the defense, you procure. For many, many things. So we should be able to also use that. But then we should again come back to the skills, because we should not just say you can procure. We need people to be skilled so that they can be up to the job. And it's not difficult skills. I mean, if you are doing hospital linen, it's not difficult skills. Laundry, there's lots that we can leverage just using also our own budget as a procurer of services in many areas. I just wanted to add that in addition to the state enterprises.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, time has been fast spent. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 questions this side and 2 questions this side, make that a round, and give our guests an opportunity to respond. May I plead with you all to just have it one question, succinct. I can believe we can all do that, so that we get, a really good response with quite a lot of substance to it. So I will start on my left and then I'll go to my right. So at the back and here. And then this side, I will go there at the back and right here in front. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome back into the country, Your Excellency. My question will be very specific. There's been an issue of reparations for slavery and crimes that were committed during colonial and post and apartheid period. I just wanted to find out, during your tenure as the AU chairperson, how did you deal with the issue of reparations particularly to try and deal with challenges, developmental challenges that the continent is facing, and the fact that the continent does not have the money capital to advance the developmental agenda of the continent. And second to that, you spoke about skills development, skills shortage. During your forums with the African diaspora, have the AU perhaps committed itself in towards the recruitment or trying to recruit the African diaspora, because most of our African diaspora, they have the necessary skill, and I should believe that the skill that they possess could somehow be used towards the developmental project of the continent. If I may be allowed one last question.
Please switch off your mic. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Pelele. My question is directed to Dr. Sibakhulu Nxamalala. The theme today is human rights, education, business, and entrepreneur. In your present, I can also add a president of a former government official into the team. So if I were to categorize those, human rights will fall under social. Education, I can slice it to social and also economics. Business and universities fall under economics. And your president as a government official, they will fall under politics. So in order to have...
Excuse me, please, may you get to your question? Thank you.
Okay. So my question is that in order to have an effective society, we need the interaction of politics, social, and economic. And those are defined as governance. So my question is that, in your perspective, can you please conceptualize what is good governance? And do we as South Africa have good governance? Because currently there is a team that our government must start to govern. Otherwise, people are losing trust.
Thank you very much.
My name is Sianda Mgadi. I'm the coordinator of the NC Youth League on campus. Now, Dr. Nkosazana, I think we've been fed propaganda that there is no skill capacity in this country. I am a scientist. I have a master's degree in geophysics. Now, I got employed by an asset manager which deals with finance and investments. And that's where most our scientists and engineers are concentrated, in banks and these financial institutions. Let me tell you why that's the case. It's because in hard science and innovation, you don't look to us. You go and consult French and Russians on whoever that you think they have capacity to develop and innovate in science and technology sectors. So do not come here and say there's no capacity. We can go fetch them in the banks. They are not taken serious. So I think that there is capacity and skills. Now let me go to metals and mining. I was looking at the discussion document of the ANC about economic transformation. Now, the ANC speaks about lengthening the life of mine. It speaks about using efficient energy and also water. Now, what the discussion document fails to capture is the question of energy as the center for economic growth. Now, if we are going to grow any economy, if we are going to expand business, we ought to have access in terms of energy capacity, and it must be very cheap. Now, how do we do that? We concentrate on our energy mix, which needs, in my own opinion, also, you need to have nuclear. We cannot be over-reliant on coal. We need renewables, we need nuclear.
That you conclude.
Okay, it's just a comment.
Request that you conclude your comment.
Oh, okay. So, with that question, I'm asking you, what is your opinion in terms of further including nuclear in the energy mix? And my own opinion is that we don't need nuclear. Perhaps we need to build it in phases because we already have nuclear capacity in Quebec. We have black professionals who have capacity and skills, who have been trained all over the world, which I know some who are in nuclear already. So that's...
Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Dineo Setole from the Young Communist League of South Africa. What I'd like to ask you, and thank you very much for a very insightful input. I'm very interested, my big question is just, what are your views on us changing or looking at parts of the constitution that are unfair to the working class to date in South Africa? This speaks particularly to the issues of workers. As we know right now, labor brokering, according to the constitution, is supported because it allows for free trade. And that means that labor brokering can happen. And as young people who want to get into this market or even want to have SMMEs, we are put in a position where we are in this really major ill of labor brokering. I mean, the Constitution supports this. And of course, the Constitution, when it comes back and speaking about the issues of land, the Constitution says that the people that stole land from 1913, and the reality of people that stole land is that they started stealing land from 1652, and even prior to that to a certain degree. So our relation to the Constitution right now in the way that it is allowing for monopoly capital to be protected. And this is something that we cannot agree with. So what are your views, Ma, on this and us being able to deal with this? What do you think, even for us as young people who are involved and who want to be active in changing the country, the steps that we should take towards this?
Okay, maybe I'll just start with the last question, because I think somebody had also asked a similar question and I missed. You know, constitutions are made to create a particular life for people in that country. And if constitutions are made at a particular point in time, and you find that in applying that constitution, there are problems, you amend the constitution. So every country does that. So in South Africa, where we feel that now this part, whether it's on land or on what, is not actually assisting us to achieve what needs to be achieved, it means it needs to be amended. But of course, to amend the constitution in this country, you need to get 66 and two-thirds of the parliamentarians to vote for an amendment. And therefore, if you want to do that, you have to convince, we have to convince that number of parliamentarians to vote for an amendment. And it means we must be clear about lobbying society, talking to society, showing why it's useful, and therefore, because those parliamentarians represent society. So I think for me, it's not a problem of the Constitution, because we need to look, it is a problem of the Constitution, but it can be amended. It's a problem of whether at this point in time you can get that two-thirds majority. I don't know whether at this point in time we can get the two-thirds majority. And having got the two-thirds majority, whether, because the courts seem to be governing as well, whether that matter will not then be taken to court, but I think even if it is, if it's amended by a two-thirds majority of parliamentarians, if the courts look at the separation of powers, it should be able to pass. So that's my view. So we need to get the numbers that we need to be able to change. And the Constitution, sometimes it's misused. I remember when I was Minister of Health trying to stop smoking in public areas, we started by banning advertising. And there was delegation after delegation, even from our people that I will not name, saying that this is against free speech. Advertising is, if I'm banning advertising, I'm against the Constitution, I'm against the human rights, the rights. So it was a big issue, but if you get your story right, and they took us to court even then, but we won. In the end, we were able to do it. So sometimes the Constitution is just misused, because it cannot be that people can advertise things that are dangerous and you say the Constitution allows free speech. So, and then going to the energy question, the policy of this country, ever since I've known it, has always been that we need a mix. And nuclear is already in the mix. So it's not like we are saying, can we use nuclear? Quebec is nuclear. So it's a mix from coal to everything. That's my view. And in Africa, we produce a lot of uranium that is needed for nuclear. And some of the countries that produce that uranium don't even have energy, because that uranium is exported raw to other countries who then use that uranium for their nuclear energy. So I don't know, that's my view, that there's no question, there's nuclear already here. So we must just get with the mix that will allow us to have enough energy to industrialize, to do everything that we need to do. The skills that are not utilized, there I would differ with you. I don't think we have enough. Secondly, it's clear to me that there is a problem even in the training. Why do engineers want to go and work for equity, finance equity companies? Because engineers should be starting companies and producing the things that we are talking about, Transnet, producing the trains, producing this, depending on what engineer you are. So I think even our own attitude, that's why I was saying we should be trained not only to be job seekers, but also to have a mindset that says, I can be a job creator, I can be, because really for me, I think it's a waste of engineers. I don't think it's government that is sending engineers there. So I don't agree. And I would like those engineers to come out and do what engineers need to do. We need to train more of them. As a geophysicist, I expect a lot. In our continent, for instance, we hardly have geophysicists. And we struggle, and so people come from outside. And then the same people come and do our geological surveys, do all our things. Then they come tomorrow to say, can we prospect? And then they come tomorrow, they already know everything about it. They say, no, it's 1,000 million tons worth when it's a trillion million tons. So I think we need, the scientists need to innovate, engineers need to do what engineers need to do. Unless you're saying there is something that is a constraint when you finish working, I think then we need to resolve what those constraints are for engineers and for other people to do what they need to do. If they are, That's what we need to resolve, because I suspect there may be constraints rather than just saying government looks at Russia for innovation. The other question of good governance. I think South Africa, because governance is not just, you look at all the different areas, our human rights things, our financial, our legislative powers, I think we have good governance in South Africa. But you are saying the government needs to govern. You said that. It's true. We need to strengthen. I think there are a number of challenges. For instance, we need to, because we have so many good institutions which we need, sometimes, I'll just take, you want to build a dam or a bridge or something. Sometimes it takes many years to get to building it. There are lots of studies that don't finish about environmental impact, this butterfly, that butterfly, which we love so much. I love them, but we need to finish those studies and get on and say whether we're going to build a dam or not, and what can be done about that. So we tend to take a long time, and then there are NGOs that may say, no, we don't want this dam. But those NGOs have 10 taps in the house, and the people who need the dam don't have a tap 5 kilometers away. And they are the ones who are saying, no, we don't want this dam. It will spoil the environment. It will spoil the landscape. But they don't look at what is that dam going to do. It's going to supply water to people who don't have water to drink when they have more taps in their house than people. So I think some of those things we need to look at. But also, we need to strengthen our legal institutions within government, because the DA has recognized that they can use the judiciary to govern. They can stop a law, go to court, delay, or laws that are there, the way you apply them, they can be taken to court. So I think we need to increase our legal inside the government so that when we are taken to court, we have good legal systems. I know from Home Affairs, we were sweating with people who are illegal here, but when we want to send them back, it's a big problem. You know, somebody who may have killed somebody outside and ran here, and the country wants him because there is evidence that he killed his wife brutally. And our courts say no, unless that country writes to say they will not hang him if he's found guilty. You can't deport that person. What do? Do you put that person into the unsuspecting public of South Africa? So these are some of the things that are hindering governance. But also, we also have to be a bit more coherent and united, and have the relevant skills also at all levels. At local government, we must have engineers and other people to actually make sure that we don't depend on consultants all the time who take a lot of money and a lot of time before a project can even be done. So those are some of the constraints that we need. But good governance, I think there is. We need to just strengthen a lot of the things that we have. And we must remember we are a young democracy. We are less than 30 years. So a lot of things we try. If we see they don't work, we must then correct them. We're not like a 100-year democracy which has tested many things and had many amendments in their constitutions. So for me, I would say, but on the economic side, I think social side, you said education. For me, education, health is not just a social thing. It's an economic. Because if you are not healthy, how are you going to work? If you are not skilled, how are you going to work? So it's all linked as far as I'm concerned. And that's why I used to have a problem when people say education and health are spending ministries. They're bottomless pits. They are not. Because for the economy and for wealth creation for our people, you need the people to be skilled and healthy. Agriculture, you need them to eat. So all those things are linked to the economy. But our economy, the problem, is not transformed. The majority of the people in this country, which are black people, are not part of the economy. And that is not sustainable. And in the long term, it will not be good governance to have a situation like that, because it's not sustainable to have a minority of the people controlling the economy, the majority not being part of the mainstream economy. It cannot be. But sometimes as South Africans, we forget, we look at African countries. Some people visit me in Ethiopia and say, look at this city, Addis. And I say to them, yes, it may not be like Santino, but it's theirs. Theirs. Reparations. You will recall that in 2001, we had a conference in Durban, a world conference on slavery and colonialism and so on, racism. And that's where the decision was taken that there must be reparations. It was taken in this country by this government. I was Minister of Foreign Affairs at the time. I was the chair of that conference. The problem is, well, let me not start with the problem. The Caribbean, they've organized themselves for these reparations. And they've asked us to support them, which we do. But the Africans are not united in demanding the reparations. And you can understand why they are not united. I will not go into it today, but maybe one day. So you can't deal with reparations. There are specific things where some of the African countries have, like Ethiopia, for instance, was fighting for those who have been to Rome. There was a big obelisk there in the center of Rome, which they had stolen from Ethiopia. So there was a big campaign. Eventually, it was sent back. But reparations generally for slavery in Africa, there's not been an agreement on how to do it. And the diaspora question, you are very correct. The diaspora, some of the diaspora are the most sophisticated and educated and skilled people. You have Nigerians working in NASA who are space scientists and so on. So the issue is that some of them, we have now agreed that as we are pursuing this program of Agenda 2063, and some of them have also agreed that where their skills are needed, they'd be able to come. It doesn't have to be their country of origin, because if you say they must only come back to their country of origin, there may be space scientists and there is no space center in their country. So we need to agree that they can come to any particular country where their skills are needed. If you are building a high-speed rail like Egypt is going to do soon, then if they want rail engineers from the diaspora, they should be able to get them even if they are not Egyptians. So that's the discussion that we are having. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. I think we really have, benefited from this discussion, from your wealth of knowledge and experience in the country, on the continent, and I think internationally. We've been challenged as an audience, and as one that is a majority of young people, to make use of the knowledge that we've gained today. And I think one of the things that made me a bit hesitant with the title today was the struggle to, socio-economic transformation. But I realized some questions that really show your commitment, to realizing some of these rights. And I also want to thank, our keynote speaker, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, for sharing with us, even her own personal journey as a female Black leader in patriarchal institutions, something I think all of the ambitious young people in this room can also learn from. I would like to thank the DLU for hosting today's event and the organizing team. I think really we've benefited from who they've chosen as a keynote speaker. I look forward to next year's program for the Human Rights Dialogue. I would like to also thank, the university leadership and management this afternoon for joining us and supporting the event, along with the Golden Keys Honor Society. I think there's a representative from the DLU who'd just like to give, a token of appreciation from the university community to you, for your time and your insightful engagement this afternoon. I'd also like to thank my co-facilitator, Yamgela, who has, supported me this afternoon. Thank you very much once again for your insightful engagement.